We quickly found that, in the first use case, within 2 weeks of this happening, that firstly, most of them forgot to use it. Yep. But of those that did use it, they liked 40% of the responses that came from. We quickly pivoted after that, and we're like, actually, this is less about how do we get this in front of customers straight away. This is now more about how do we figure out what areas AI could help with. So we ended up helping the business to analyze topic areas where training might be better provided. We helped them identify documentation, hit lists that they could be going after and trying to do, or onboarding procedures that might educate staff better, because everything we'd ingested had not been good enough for the AI to be able to make use of it. So this is just business value, right? From the tech startup side, it was a very different approach. We had to find a sample data set. Some were mentioned earlier where you can grab this sort of things. We had a bunch that we had used previously. So we gave it sort of all this dummy data around what a user profile might be, what a typical use would be. We defined kind of the very specific use case around like a designer needing logos, etc. Or someone needing logos off a designer, and someone needing help with the language because they're about to travel to a city. They wanted a sort of prompt, a catch-up course. And we sort of walked through those sorts of things. But then we moved on pretty quickly because we're like, okay, we've got some basic evals, but let's skip to what we need to for business value, because no CEO is going to sit there and go, oh, great, that dummy data you used, the AI liked it and it seemed pretty good, awesome. So we went down the old, again, UX route when that used to be a problem, and we found some early adopters, another story, and we asked them, we built them a journey that was basically like, do this once manually. The normal way you've always been doing it. Now, at this point, here's an option. You could actually ask AI to help. And we measured things like, did they do it? Did they ask the AI to help? How much did they rate that? What was the end result? Did they come back the next time when they repeated the journey to do it again? So we measured things like that. There is so much cooler stuff around the technical things. But I'll tell you, that's the slide we stuck on when we presented back to the C-suite, to the head of technology. This is the evals they cared about. And my tip to anyone here that's in a technical team and is frustrated that projects are being shut down or you haven't had enough time to prove it and things like that is don't forget this slide when you're presenting back. If you cannot measure it back to business value, the rest of the evals are going to be useless. Your project will be shut down, you'll be asked to play with something else, or AI will be thrown out the building and said, we're too early, it's not ready yet, things like that. Let's get to this one, performance evals. So this was all about, does it work? Again, the guys have already gone into way more depth around more technical ways you can measure the accuracy and the expected results and things like that. So I'm not going to repeat any of that stuff. What I will talk about is that performance came down to, in both these scenarios, a very specific expectation that we weren't aware of until after we'd run all the experiments. We missed a trick, right, in both these scenarios, and we've looked at how do we sort of improve that moving forward. We've started with some eval systems and built them out, but more important, the reason why we had to go custom is because we found out every business has a different idea of what performance means to them. And it depends on their customer, it depends on their engineering team, it depends on the use case and the workflows. But if we didn't all agree on what performance meant, does it mean security? Does it mean speed? Does it mean all those sorts of things? We're just talking different languages, and you guys as technical people will spend hours and hours and hours on working on something performance. It'd be amazing, it'd be really good, and it will not hit the mark. I talked about the tomato test earlier. We did everything we thought was right. It didn't meet the use case of performance because we didn't deal with the sort of error rates or the edge cases that the guys talked about earlier. Another example of where this could go wrong. When you do what we kind of did over this place, and we weren't as cowboy as what I'm describing in terms of just chucking everything in, but it was super important because we'd been to another business where one of their problems had been a similar thing where they chucked it for a HR system, they threw everything they had into it, and anyone was able to go, what is Ben Fogarty's salary into the prompt? Obviously, it would have said not enough, but on top of that, it would have said what it is. And so they had to backpedal very quickly. So it did everything else in performance that it needed to, but they had not thought about the sort of who needs access to this information. You can't just feed it to AI and expect it to be able to interpret, well, hang on, you're not supposed to know that sort of information. So from that side, when I went back to step 2, where foundations are super important, we always use a data platform gateway whenever we do it. And there's better ones than probably the ones we muck around with. We use it because it's familiar. We chuck it in and we get it up and running if the customer doesn't already have something like this. But we know from day one, where is the data source came for everything? And if we need to, how do we reverse it out or put permissions around what the AI can do with that data? Super high level, someone smarter than me will explain how that all works. But that approach is super important no matter what you think. You might be ingesting stuff you don't think is that sensitive or that important. But think about this scenario. What we thought about was that a CEO came along. One time he couldn't access his email, so he asked IT to basically say, I need to know this important thing and I can't access my email right now. Go and get it for me. And the support ticket had in it the file that he'd asked for and was uploaded. It was market sensitive, right? It was fine because it was in the business, but suddenly you ingest that to AI, suddenly anyone asking that similar question in a similar context with a similar prompt is going to potentially get that sort of information. You're in a bit of trouble. So having that data in place was super important. For the tech startup, just really quickly on that one, we measured in the UAT stage, so we had early adopters. We ended up getting about 500 early adopters playing with the platform. It started with incentives, but then we actually got a whole bunch of just sort of organic, which was fantastic for the startup. But what happened more importantly was that from day one, it definitely wasn't good. It was not a better experience. It did not help them do what they wanted to do, and the AI was there. Now, we could have spent probably 3 months playing around with just prompts and sort of what do we think that should be and that sort of thing. It helped us really shortcut every experiment we did. And we said to the user, we've just done an update, we've run some tests, but we'd love your feedback on whether you think this is closer. And not only on is it closer, but why is it? Why is it or why isn't it closer? And so again, getting the users involved as quickly as possible is super important, whether that be internal or not. Second last one, I'm going to fly through this because we're running out of time, but basically adoption and trust. So this is the one that I said before most people miss. I've had many startups. My thing is, if I need to get out of the building, if I don't have someone using it as quickly as possible, when it's safe, but I don't need it to be perfect. If I can explain the context of the use case, and if I can put the parameters in, this is before it gets to production, but if I can put the parameters around, this is what I actually want you to do. It doesn't do anything else yet, but I need your help. I need you to play with it. I want you to trial it. I want you to teach it. I want you to help me do. That approach really, really helps. So with the law firm, we were looking at, obviously, all the responses that it generated, how many times, not did they use it because we asked them to, but come week 3, come week 4, how many times did they go back and use it when we didn't ask them to? That was huge. Because not only did the ones that put their hand up for the pilot come back, and we had like 80% of them reuse it repeatedly and start to use it more and more frequently, they began to share that with their colleagues. We need to do this. This is amazing. It's saving us time. Don't have to deal with all that. And that was a huge success to do with adoption. With the tech startup, it was about finding the moment in the journey. When did they want to use the AI to help with a step? When did they not do it? And we sort of measured that part of the journey as well. And last but, again, not least, is around the governance and risks. Is it responsible? So for the law firm, we did this. It sounds so cool because it's like James Bond stuff, but like red teaming tests. You guys probably heard of this, right? Any engineer would love this. It's basically we build a thing, go and break it. Go and test and try to see if you can do. Now, the tools you saw before are great ways of doing that, in the sort of pre-production environment, and also to put in place tests that you do with it as well. What I will say about this, just because of time, is that in both of these where we used a whole bunch of tools around bias detection, the guys mentioned some others earlier, we did a whole bunch of prompt filtering, we looked at, the sort of We've used systems that they already had in place, like data security platforms, to see where the data come from. We have definitely taken on the approach of that needs to be in the CI/CD pipeline. It's great to play around with, it's great to experiment, but we've walked into too many massive, mature businesses that have been doing AI for over a year now on certain areas, and they're still manually evaluating governance and things like that. So this is the last bit. Key takeaways. I'm not going to read through it, but I think the general message comes down to this, and you can get these slides off me later because I know I'm flicking quick. If you're trying to get AI adoption in your business and you're taking projects further than POC, don't just focus on the model. Don't just focus on the tech. Focus on proving business value early. If you track the impact constantly and you keep improving those other things as you go, you will be aligned with the business decision makers and you'll be aligned with the technical outcomes that you're trying to do. You'll be able to prioritize together and you'll start to talk each other's language. It's hilarious that most of the AI projects we do is about, language models. And yet when we walk into businesses, they don't have a language between themselves about how to do AI and how to do evals together. So that's the number one message from me. Thank you very much.
Okay, thanks. So how much pushback have you seen from people worried about losing their jobs when you go into companies?
So great question. It depends how it's positioned. We've definitely seen, we haven't thankfully been involved in this where the whole point of doing the optimizations and efficiencies was to job cut. This was in the law firm that we talked about and some others. It's definitely been more about they're not focusing on the right things, right? Having to deal with a load of 1,500 emails a day or support tickets a day, they could be doing something better with their time. They could be creating the training material to help people help themselves, right? They could be putting in better systems so that the printer stops breaking every 5 minutes and they have to answer an email to fix it every time or talk to someone through how to do it. So when it's positioned as that motivator, definitely. But this has been the problem from day one with any consultant coming in or any tech project is we want to help you do something, but it feels like we're marking your homework or it feels like we're going to replace what you're doing. If you can position it in a business that it's about we want to help you focus on something more valuable and the business genuinely believes that, I think you can be successful. Otherwise, you are going to get pushback, reluctance of it's taking our jobs. Definitely.
One last question.
Hi, so thank you for the presentation. It was really eye-opening. But with talks, not just with yourself, but Arato and everyone else, you talked about testing, but how do you guys go about testing in a non-biased way? That's my question.
Yeah, good question. So I think like the guys talked about, you actually want to test against the bias and you need to understand what is the sort of genuine outcome that you want. But the way we've approached just really high level and generally around how we're going to deal with bias, because let's face it, this is one of the problems in the boardroom around adoption of AI is we're not going to be able to trust it's going to answer in a way that's racist or discriminate or whatever, right? The example we had in the startup was, what if someone puts a comment that all designers are lazy? They said it, not me. And then someone goes and looks for a designer. Is the AI going to go, oh my gosh, it thinks all designers are lazy now because it read that comment from 5 different people or whatever? So it's definitely something to address. But I think aside from the systems that the guys talked about of a way of approaching that, the way to get it through in the boardroom is all about looking at risk. And you can use traditional things around risk matrix and that sort of thing. But again, this is why use case by use case is positive way to do it, because if you try to solve everything all at once, you just won't win. So how do you approach the use case and go, what are the edge cases here? What's the bias that could introduce from the data we've done? I think that's a way to sell it to the non-technical people around how to approach it.